has it been? No, I mean, I don't think it hasn't been colonized by immigrants, but I do think that some people, depending where you are in the country, perhaps feel that it's no longer a country that they recognize. And you do speak to them, they do find that there's been we have had mass migration, and it's been so quick and so intense that there hasn't been a request on those that arrive to integrate and assimilate, and that has fractured cohesion within certain parts of the country.
Okay, Florence?
I haven't seen the article, and I think, frankly, it's just wrong. My understanding, I'm trying to think, the last census, 2021?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it was about 82% whites in the UK, about 18% BME. So this notion that, the UK has been taken over is frankly incorrect. And I think it's about how we recognise that in some parts of the country, we may have an issue in terms of illegal immigration, but actually we need to talk up the benefits of migration and talk about the benefits that many people from such different diverse backgrounds have brought to the country. I think about my own constituency, where I could walk into a classroom, any one of our primary schools, you'll hear over 50 languages. Those children are contributing to UK life. They're enriching UK life. And I think we need to get away from this division and making out the othering of people who may look and sound different to us, and actually celebrate diversity in all its forms.
Taxes, are you going to interrupt me every time I speak? And the reason why we have stagnant wages is that we have imported foreign cheap labour, and the wages are so cheap that they cannot support themselves. And what you have is the British taxpayer is supporting those that have just arrived in the country because they cannot support themselves. And that is a government policy. You do have foreigners who enter this country.
British politics like this one. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to Doc British Believe It, or not over 98% of viewers watch our content without hitting the follow button. Subscribing is completely free.
Who do have access to welfare and benefits, and British people find that offensive and they find that unfair. If I go to a different country, I cannot claim welfare. You know that refugees in some councils in London go to the top of the housing list.
Immigration are automatically
able to claim benefits. No, I said
that's incorrect.
Well, they get housing.
That's incorrect.
They get housing. They do get housing. Refugees don't get housing.
That's incorrect.
Are you saying refugees? Are you saying refugees? Where are they housed? Where are they housed? Is housing not a benefit?
That's incorrect.
Is housing a benefit, Florence?
Yeah, because we should help people who are destitute.
So they do claim benefits, number one. They have legal aid should they commit a crime. That is all paid by the taxpayer and the British taxpayer. And we have... you ask the British people, they do think there's been too much legal immigration. Of course, illegal migration is a huge problem, and it flourished under the Tories and it's flourishing under Labour. We've had record amount of people, and the reason is that you both both your parties refuse to treat illegal immigrants as criminals when they arrive. It is illegal to enter our country.
We changed the law to make that expressively so. The 22 Act made it a criminal offence to come here in a small boat.
And do you know how many was prosecuted under your government for illegal immigration?
It would only just come in.
1%, because
it would only just come in. We changed the law to do that.
Who cares about the law? If the law's not implemented, who cares about it? You didn't have the political will to implement it. Only 1% of illegal migrants were prosecuted under that law.
We changed the law in 2022.
All performative to change the law, not
immediately reversed that, so it's now no longer a criminal offence to come here.
It's 8:49.
What you've just heard is a debate that perfectly captures the modern immigration argument in the UK: emotional, data-driven, interrupted, and deeply divided. On one side, you have the argument that mass migration has happened too fast, too intensely, and without enough integration. On the other side, you have the argument that Britain remains overwhelmingly British, that diversity strengthens the country, and that the idea of takeover is factually incorrect. Let's break this down calmly and properly. The first speaker makes an important point about perception. They say the country hasn't been colonized, but that some people feel like they no longer recognize the place they grew up in. That's not a statistical argument. That's an emotional and cultural one. And perception matters in politics. If communities change rapidly, new languages, new customs, new shops, new places of worship, some residents will feel disoriented, especially if those changes happen within a decade instead of over generations. Whether that feeling is justified or not statistically, it's politically powerful. Then comes the counter-argument. The second speaker brings up census data, around 82% white, 18% from minority ethnic backgrounds as of 2021. The point being, the UK is not being taken over. The numbers simply do not support that narrative. And that's also true. The UK remains majority white British. So claims of demographic replacement are exaggerated if we look purely at national statistics. But here's where the real disagreement lies: national averages versus local realities. Nationally, 18% minority ethnic. But in some cities, some boroughs, some towns, the numbers are very different. In certain parts of London, Birmingham, Leicester, Bradford, demographics have shifted dramatically over 20 to 30 years. So when someone says I don't recognize my area anymore, they're usually speaking about local change, not national totals. Now let's move to economics. One side argues that mass migration has suppressed wages by importing cheap labor, that migrants cannot support themselves on low wages, so the taxpayer subsidized them through benefits, housing, and services. This argument taps into a long-running economic debate. Economists are divided. Some studies suggest migration can slightly reduce wages at the very lowest end of the labor market. Other studies show migration increases overall economic growth and fills labor shortages, particularly in healthcare, agriculture, and hospitality. But again, averages matter less than lived experience. If someone sees stagnant wages, rising rents, pressure on GP appointments, full schools, they may link that directly to migration, whether the data fully supports that link or not. Then the welfare argument comes in. The claim, foreigners enter the country and have access to welfare and benefits, which British taxpayers fund. That feels unfair to many people. The counterclaim, refugees don't get special treatment, and housing isn't simply handed out unfairly. Here's the reality in simplified terms. Asylum seekers often receive basic accommodation and limited support while their claim is processed. Recognized refugees can access benefits like any other resident. They do not automatically jump to the top of housing lists nationwide, but they may receive emergency housing support. So when one person says they get housing and the other says that's incorrect, they are partly talking past each other. Housing provided during asylum processing is real, but it's not the same as automatically being placed above locals on permanent housing lists everywhere. The problem is the shouting prevents clarity. Then the discussion shifts to illegal migration. The claim, entering the UK illegally should be treated as a criminal act. The 2022 law made small boat arrivals a criminal offense. Only around 1% were prosecuted. Therefore, the law wasn't enforced. Therefore, it was meaningless. That's a serious policy criticism. If a law exists but is barely used, it raises questions about political will. Governments sometimes pass tough-sounding legislation, but struggle to implement it due to legal challenges, international obligations, capacity limits, or court rulings. Then comes the accusation that Labour reversed the criminalisation. This reflects the wider political divide. One side believes deterrence requires strict enforcement and criminal consequences. The other side argues that asylum seekers should not be criminalised for how they arrive, especially if they are seeking protection under international law. And this is where the debate becomes ideological. Is illegal entry a crime that must be punished to deter future crossings? Or is it a humanitarian issue driven by global instability, smuggling gangs, and asylum rights? Both sides believe they are defending fairness. One side says fairness means protecting borders, protecting wages, and protecting taxpayers. The other says fairness means upholding asylum rights, valuing diversity, and recognizing migration's contributions. Notice something important in this exchange. Both sides accuse the other of ignoring reality. One says, you refuse to treat illegal immigrants as criminals. The other says, you are spreading incorrect information about benefits. Both claim the moral high ground. And that's why immigration remains one of the most divisive political issues in Britain today. There are three key tensions underneath this debate. First, speed versus scale. Even if total numbers aren't historically unprecedented, the speed of change in recent years, especially net migration figures exceeding 600,000 in certain periods, has shocked many voters. Second, national benefit versus local pressure. The UK economy may benefit overall from migration, but specific communities feel strain on housing, schools, and services. Third, law versus implementation. Passing tough border laws is politically popular. Enforcing them effectively is much harder. When people hear only 1% prosecuted, they don't hear administrative complexity. They hear weakness. When people hear 82% white British, they don't hear reassurance. They hear dismissal of local concerns. The shouting over whether housing counts as a benefit shows how the debate often collapses into semantics instead of solutions. Because the real question isn't whether migration exists. It's about control, fairness, integration, and trust. Do voters believe the system is controlled? Do they believe rules are enforced? Do they believe newcomers are expected to integrate? Do they believe the economic model benefits ordinary workers? If the answer to those questions is no, frustration grows. If politicians respond only with statistics or only with emotion, the gap widens. And that's what this clip shows, not just disagreement, but two completely different frameworks of thinking. One framework says, diversity enriches, migration contributes, and division harms cohesion. The other framework says, mass migration fractures cohesion, suppresses wages, and burdens taxpayers. Both claim to defend the country. The challenge for any government is balancing border control with humanitarian duty, economic need with wage protection, diversity with social cohesion. Because if the debate stays at the level of interruption and accusation, nothing changes. Immigration isn't just a policy issue. It's an identity issue, an economic issue, and a trust issue. And until politicians address all three, calmly, clearly, and honestly, these debates will continue exactly like this, heated, repetitive, and unresolved.